Peugeot's electric cars have until now been smallish in size and smallish in terms of range. But this car, well, it's set to change all of that. It is big, it comes with a big range, and it will inevitably have a big price tag too. But before I take the new E-3008 for a drive to see if big really is better, please do subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on, because if you're into electric cars, then this is the place for you. The 3008 was a very important car for Peugeot, and it sold like hotcakes. You know, it was great looking, it had a very nice interior, it was pleasant to drive. But this new version comes with a rather dramatic and probably not unexpected change. For the first time, an all-electric version joins the lineup. And this is it. Of course, design and beauty is very much in the eye of the beholder, but personally, I am a fan of Peugeot's design. I like the way its cars look, and the E-3008 is no exception. It's got those familiar subtle creases, slimmer LED headlights and aerodynamic wheels. And who doesn't love those 3 slashes for daytime running lights, which look a bit like a lion has had an argument with the car. Peugeot has gone for a swoopier design for this car. As you can see, the roof line is more sloping. That is to help with the aerodynamics for the electric versions. And Peugeot is calling it a fastback. But whatever you call it, I do think it's a handsome car. In terms of size, it's slightly smaller than a Hyundai Ioniq 5, and around the same size as a Volkswagen ID.5. Now, you'd expect the sloping roofline to have a negative impact on the boot space, but actually it hasn't, certainly in comparison with the old car, because it's the same size. You get a little bit less if you opt for the twin motor version. It's an okay usable space, it's just not massively deep. I think something like the Renault Scenic E-Tech, which is on the way soon, will have a slightly larger boot. But I do like the fact that you've not got an awkward load lip, and I also like this hidden boot space under here, under the flat floor. Quite handy for chucking cables in there. And you can also fold the rear seats down. They've got that sort of 40-20-40 configuration. So you've got lots of extra load space there. There is no frunk, so your cables are going to have to live in the back, but it does tow up to 1,250 kilograms, which isn't bad considering most of its rivals don't. So in the back, and straight away I noticed that the doors don't really open to a good wide angle. I think if you're going to be getting children in and out of car seats in the back, that could be a bit of a pain getting them in. However, I do really like all the material in here, this sort of lovely grey textured material you get in the front. I think that when it comes to space, that lovely roof line, it does make it feel a little bit, I don't know, not claustrophobic in here, but it doesn't feel bright and airy. I'm only 5'4", headroom is okay. Manos, who I think you're 6 foot, Manos, yes, he's 6 foot behind the camera. He found it was all right. There's a nice scoop in the headline in there, which helps. But I do think that if you're tall, you're going to have problems with leg room. I'm 5'4". The driver's position is set for somebody who's about 6 foot. And yeah, I'm okay. Nice scoop under the seats for my feet. And there's again a scoop here in the back of the seats. But honestly, I think if you're carrying taller teens or leggy adults in here, there'll be a fight to get into the front passenger seat. I also think it's a shame that whilst you've got this lovely flat floor and you would just about squeeze 3 on here, whoever ends up in the middle has got this really big centre console to contend with. So again, it's really only going to work for smaller children in the centre. On the plus side, you've got decent storage, you've got these little storage pockets on the back of the doors. And as I said, I do think it has a nice feel back here. I just wish it was a bit more spacious. One of my pet hates is when car makers say their cars have interiors that feel like cockpits. Don't know why, but it does really irritate me. However, in the case of this car, it does feel a bit like a cockpit in here. In fact, they call it a panoramic eye cockpit. I really like the way it kind of curves around you. And you've got this hockey stick here in the centre, which helps to divide the 2 sides of the interior. I like the way it stands out with this lighter grey fabric, which is around the interior, which looks and feels really nice. But it's not just there to look good, it's also practical. You've got the car's main controls. easily right in your reach here. You've got different driving modes, volume, which I really like having it there, and also climate controls. Now, for the new generation of Peugeot interiors, I do think they've been a bit inspired by BMW, because you get this slightly curved screen, which feels a bit familiar actually. It's actually two screens blended to become one, like the BMW screens. The one on your right is sort of all the sat-nav, infotainment system, all your apps are in here. The one in front of you is all the info that the driver needs. The screens are nice and sharp. It has a nice sort of premium look to it, nice and bright. But I don't think the graphics on the navigation are that great, and the navigation itself, well, I've used it a couple of times out here, and it did take me to some strange places on that roads that really didn't feel like roads. But I'll reserve judgment on that until we spend more time in it in the UK. But as always, it will sync to CarPlay and Android Auto, all of that. Right, what else to tell you? Yeah, I think the quality in here is really nice. The different use of materials, there's lots of recycled materials in here, and it feels solid and well put together. Oh, I also like this kind of extra area down here, I forgot to mention that, where you can quickly flick through all the things you want. So if you want navigation, climate, media, and these are called eye toggles, and you can change them around so that you have easy access to the functions that you use a lot on the screen, which again is something that I really like. I also like the steering wheel. I know it's small, but I think it gives a nice sporty feeling. I drove a Peugeot E-3008 for quite a long time. I loved it in that car. I know some people do struggle to get it in the right position, but actually it's always worked for me. In terms of storage, so you've got storage in here, sort of compartment in this central area. You've got two modest size cup holders. I don't know what it is about French cars. The cup holders are always quite small. I can never get my big massive cup holders in them. And then down here you've got another compartment with a little lid that lifts off, and this is where you'll find your two USB-C charging ports. And this is one of my gripes. Only one of them will charge, the other one is to link to CarPlay or Android Auto. And also what irritates me is when you are plugged in to charge, you can't close this and just sort of have your phone on there. You have to actually either have it open or tuck your phone away inside. It just would have been nice if there had been a little groove in that you could have fed a cable out of. But other than that tiny gripe, I do think the quality and feel of the interior is really good. So let's talk stats, and it is that big range that will inevitably grab the headlines. However, you're going to have to wait for that. This car has the 73 kilowatt hour battery, giving an official range of an impressive 326 miles. And this is the smaller battery. That top one is a rather massive 98 kilowatt hours, almost double the size of batteries that Peugeot currently offers in its electric cars. Now, Peugeot claim it will be good for 435 miles when it arrives. The only rival I can think of that comes close to this on paper is the Fisker Ocean. Of course, range claims are absolutely fine. It's how they stack up in the real world that matters. And I haven't always found Peugeot's previous electric cars to be the most efficient, particularly in winter. But this car, well, it's built on new underpinnings, which have been designed with electric cars in mind. So Peugeot claims that when it comes to efficiency, the E-3008 will outdo rivals, including, wait for it, the Tesla Model Y, a car that is well known for being super efficient. Today I've been averaging 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. Now that works out at around 270 miles, which is a little way off the claimed range of over 320. But as always on a test day, it's quite an unfair comparison to make because your driving pattern isn't as normal and you're not driving a full cycle. And as always, we need to do a proper range test back in the UK when we have the car for longer to be sure about efficiency. So driving, and I'm going to start off by saying that unlike some recent electric Peugeots, like for example the E-3008, which I do enjoy driving a lot, this isn't a sporty car to drive at all. It's very clear that Peugeot's prioritise comfort over handling, which you might say, given how this car is going to be used, is completely understandable. Okay, let's start with the good. So it's quiet in here, very nice and quiet. And the E-3008 definitely delivers a comfortable, relaxing driving experience. You've got very light steering, which is really handy in city streets with tight little roads. And it does feel nice and solid. Feels well planted to the road, particularly when you get on faster roads like motorways. However, the light steering is handy when you're nipping around town, but I would like it to have a bit more feel to it. Just doesn't seem to connect the car to the road, and it isn't exactly quick for an electric car. Look, it's heavy. It comes in at well over 2 tons, I think 2.1 from memory, and you can feel the weight of the car. It's not a massive fan of potholes or lumpy roads. It gets quite bouncy in here. Look, you can play around with the driving modes, which are just down here. You've got eco mode, more of that later because that helps you boost the regeneration. And you can also put it into sport mode. Now, I actually prefer this in sport mode, where it tightens up the steering. You've got a bit more response. But of course, if you're driving around in sport mode all the time, you're going to eat into the range that you've got. So this is the single motor version. 0 to 60 takes 8.7 seconds. It's not as sprightly as in some electric cars. And of course, power isn't everything, but rivals do offer more power and more punch. And I'd like it to have a little bit more for things like overtaking on the motorway, for example. Particularly, I think when this car is loaded up with people, it could probably do with a little bit more punch. Now, there are some other versions heading our way, including a dual motor version. And I would expect that will have a bit more, just a bit more acceleration and a bit more power. And of course, you'll also get a bit more traction from that in bad weather. Now, interestingly, that's got the same battery, but Peugeot says that you actually don't lose any range. And normally you do lose a few miles when you spec a second motor. So it's going to be interesting to see how that fares when we get it tested in the real world.
Personally, I think that smaller battery will be more than enough for most of us. But if you regularly drive longer journeys, then you may want to wait until the larger one is added to the range.
Right then, regeneration. So that's one of the 3 modes on offer is eco mode. And you can also control it through these paddles here on the steering wheel. So what's it like? I haven't had a chance to play around with it much, but it doesn't seem to give full one pedal driving, which I really like. It's a bit of a kind of midway regeneration. You can definitely slow the car down, but I don't think you can bring it down to a complete stop. At least I haven't managed to do that yet.
What I do appreciate is how light and airy and comfortable the driver's seat is. The seats are good for a longer journey, and I also like the position of the gear selector, which is just off to the side of the steering wheel.
So how much is it going to cost you? Well, the entry-level single motor car with that 73 kilowatt hour battery pack comes in at just under £46,000, which is okay value for money when you consider the Tesla Model Y has less range. The E-3008's interior is also a world away from cars like the ID.5. It feels much plusher, much nicer. And although I hate to admit it, it is nicer inside than my old favourite, the Skoda Enyaq. But I do think the Skoda is much nicer to drive. However, its big rival, and the one that's going to be really interesting, is the Renault Scenic E-Tech, which is less money and also has a pretty chunky 87 kilowatt hour battery pack. And we'll be getting those 2 cars together as soon as we can in the UK.
When it comes to topping up your battery, both sizes can take on board a peak of 160 kilowatt DC charging. That means half an hour to fill up 20 to 80% for the smaller battery. The larger one can sustain peak power for longer, so it takes slightly less, 27 minutes to do that same 20 to 80% charge. A standard 3-phase onboard charger means that to go flat to full, it's just over 6.5 hours on a 3-phase public point. That compares to 10 hours on a 7.4 kilowatt home wall box.
A heat pump isn't fitted as standard on any models though. You will have to pay extra for that. And if you want heated seats to heat the person rather than the whole interior, then that's only standard on the top of the range model. There's also no preconditioning to prepare the battery to take a charge. Peugeot had initially decided that the car didn't need it.
Although there is now a plan to add this, and it will come as an over-the-air update later in 2024.
So the 3008 is a car competing in a category where price and range are absolutely key, and there is a lot of competition. And whilst after a few hours in it I do think it's good, particularly the interior, I'm just not sure that it's wowed me. I'm going to have to get it for longer in the UK and put it head to head with some of its rivals before I can decide fully. And you are going to want to see when those videos have landed. So if you aren't already, please do subscribe to the channel, and of course switch your notifications on, because if you're into electric cars, this is the place for you.
If you're considering the Peugeot E-3008, then you should also be looking at Skoda Enyaq. And you can check out our video just here in the top corner. Also worth a look is the Nissan Ariya. And look, there's a link to that too.